Hi guys. Oh dear. Right, now then, it's been what? About a year since I did the last video on Topaz D Noise AI, and the other day I actually needed to use Topaz, and of course I used to be on 2.2 and then it sort of got updated a little bit, and then I've not used it for a while, and so the other day I updated to version 3, version 3.4, and I was blown away. And then of course this morning I've had version 3.4.1 drop, and so I've downloaded that and I thought, I'd better do a blooming video. Now the previous video that I did, which I'll put a link to up on the up at the top here, that workflow, Smart Object workflow, Lightroom Smart Objects in Photoshop, is still valid, but there's one or two little things you might want to bear in mind if you go and follow that workflow, and one or two subtle changes. And to be quite honest with you, this latest version of Topaz has blown me away. It seriously has. So what I'm going to do is we'll do this shot in Lightroom, we'll do this shot over in Raw Therapee, and we'll do this shot as a raw file inside Topaz D Noise. Okay, so I'm just going to take this image into the develop module, and I'm just going to linearize it and take all the sharpening off. Now that linearization is just a process version swap, but what we've done is we've taken all of Lightroom sharpening off, as you can see right there. Now in the previous video that I did, which I mentioned earlier, if you watch that video, I was turning Lightroom sharpening down by probably around 30 to 50%. I would now recommend that you keep your sharpening in Lightroom turned off, but I would keep using the colour noise reduction. Don't use any luminance noise reduction out of Lightroom, but use the colour reduction. I just find Lightroom's colour reduction exceptionally good. Alright, so here we've got our image. Okay, Mr. Angry, Miguel. I've not seen him for 2 and a bit years. I hope he's alright. But yeah, Mr. Angry. So as you can see, because I've linearized the image, we've sort of made the noise a little bit less obvious than it is on by default. That's because of the excessive contrast that we've got by default in Lightroom. If you use Lightroom's default import settings, that is. So, you know, fundamentally, we just linearize the image and remove the sharpening. And so the noise is still there. You can see it, it's just plain as day, but it's not quite so obvious. So all I'm going to do is just come up to the basics panel, and I'm just going to feed a little bit of vibrance into the image, just to punch the colour up a little bit, because this image was shot 5600 ISO. Yes, it's shot on a Nikon D5, but you know, there you go, it's still 5600 ISO, and it's still got a boatload of noise in it. And we might just add a little bit of exposure, and there we go. I mean, that is as far as I'm going to take this image. So bear in mind, we've got no sharpening on the image at all. So I'm going to right click and I'm just going to go edit in and edit in Topaz D Noise. So I'm not bothering with the Smart Object stage in Photoshop, and we'll just click edit. If you're on a Canon printer, yes, stick it at 300. If you're on Epson, I use Epson printers. I leave the resolution set to 300 and then I just upsample it in Lightroom, in the Lightroom print module, to 360. But if you want to change that resolution to 360 because you're on a Epson printer, then please feel free to do so. So I'm just going to go and click edit, and with a little bit of luck and a fair wind, Topaz D Noise will open up. And I suppose we'll go for a comparison view. All right. So we've now got, as opposed to my previous video where we'd only got 2 options, we've now got 4 options. So we've got low light, we've got clear, we've got severe noise, and we seem to have low light twice. We should actually have standard, but I'm just going to go back to a single view. And if we click standard and just click it on auto and just let things update down here, so we no longer have the little sort of thing in the middle of the image. Standard's done an alright job, but if we go to clear and just let that update, now clear, if we just scroll down and look at Miguel's head and just let it update again, that is just spectacular. But look how sharp this bird is. To me, it's just the sharpness is verging on false, and we've only got choices of low and high for enhanced sharpness, and for this particular image, to me, that's just a little bit too sharp. So let's go for low light, and let's put that on auto and just let it update. So don't get ahead of yourself, you've just got to wait for this updating to complete. And that to me is just, well, it's mind-boggling, to be quite honest with you. And this is the one thing that upsets me a little bit, and it's me personally, because I don't quite understand what the hell Topaz are doing. There's some sort of black magic and juju going on in here, and the noise reduction coupled with the sharpness, it's well, I mean, we can produce images like this in the likes of Raw Therapee, but believe you me, it's hard work. It is hard work. There's an awful lot of steps to go through, and when you can produce results like this with just a click, I sort of, well, I can see where people who want to use plugins are coming from. Yeah. So, do we really need all this noise reduction? Let's take the noise reduction down to just 3 and let it update. And there we go. And we've still got rid of all the noise in the background, and we might just have picked up an extra little tiny bit of detail in some of the more high frequency details in the image. So all we're going to do is just go and click apply and let it process out. And it's really nice because it gives you a little timer here telling you how long it's going to take. And there we go. And here's the image in Lightroom, which notice it's come back into Lightroom automatically, and it's not generated the thumbnail view yet, but you know, I mean, wow. I mean, it's just staggering, that is. And I mean, just to finish it off, we could go and add a couple of points of clarity. Just keep your eye on that histogram, make sure we're not generating any blown highlights or clipped shadows. And then all I'll do is I'll just come down and stick a highlight priority vignette on there, as is my usual trick. And there we go, and then just back it off. Yeah, and that'll do for me. That's just drawing attention to Miguel, Mr. Angry, and I think he looks absolutely spectacular. And we've got rid of all the noise in the image. I mean, wow, Jesus, it is quite staggering. Anyway, if I come over to this next image, now this was sent in by Steve Kaluski, and this is a CR3 file, okay, and what camera is it off? Can't remember. 1DX Mark III. So all I'm going to do is take this over into the develop module, and again we'll linearize it and we'll take all the sharpening off. Now we've got these white feathers here on the neck of this bird, and they are looking a little bit on the bright side. And we can actually go in the basics panel, and we can attempt to turn down the highlights, and we can bring them back that way. But you'll notice we get a massive impact on the rest of the image. And so all I'm going to do is actually show in Finder, so I can show this image in Finder, and then I can right click and I can open that in Raw Therapee. But I don't have to do that because I've already got it open in Raw Therapee. He says, yes, there we go. And so here's the image in Raw Therapee. It's got nothing done to it. This is a development version of Raw Therapee that still can't understand the EXIF data off 1DX Mark III CR3 files. So it can't get a proper handle on the recorded white balance. So I'm just going to bring the white balance down to around about there. And the thing is, I want to actually recover the detail over in these white feathers on the nape of the neck. So I'm just going to go and click highlight recovery, put it in color propagation, and then just go and hit the highlight compression and just pull them back that way. And you can see we're generating a few little dark specks in there. So we can fundamentally come in here and just turn on impulse noise reduction, and those little specks have gone away. Alrighty, so what else do I want to do? I might just come over and get a graduated filter and just turn it around 180, and there we go, and then just lighten it up at the bottom a little bit, rather like that. Okie dokie, and I might just take that up there like that. Yes, that'll do. Okay, so that's all I'm doing to this image, apart from one thing. And because everything gets capture sharpening applied to it in my version of Raw Therapee, because of the way I have my default process profile set up, I'm just going to come into the Raw Development tab, and I'm going to turn capture sharpening off. Okay, now I'm going to scoot this over to Photoshop, and there we go. That was quick, wasn't it? And so there's the image out of Raw Therapee, and I'm just going to duplicate that layer, and we're just going to go to Filter, Topaz Labs, Topaz D Noise AI. You are invoking a Topaz plugin. And here it comes. And let's just leave this on low light and let it update. And look at that. Look at the sharpness on these feathers. The definition on the black tips of these feathers. And how smooth that background is. And yet these little filaments of these twisted feathers here are still looking absolutely perfect. And we've kept all the detail in the feathers on the nape of the neck. And let's just wait for it to update again, seeing as we've moved the preview. There we go. And that is plenty sharp enough. Thank you very much. So we'll click apply on there. And you'll notice the time has moved, yes, to over here in the right-hand column. Oh, it's changed to soon. Yes, it'll be done soon. And there we go. So if we take that up to a 100% view, see how nice and sharp and detailed everything is in there, and how lovely and noise-free that background is. And yet the original image showed plenty of noise and no sharpening in the actual subject itself. Okie dokie, so let's switch back to Lightroom again. Bear in mind that image of Steve's was 10,000 ISO. Now, okay, so you might think, well, a Nikon D5 is a relatively modern camera, A 1DX Mark III is a relatively modern camera. What about an older camera? Alrighty, so let's go for a 1DX Mark I. And this image is 12,800 ISO. You've seen plenty of shots of me before of this goshawk in the rain, in the pitch basically the pitch black. Yeah, wow, what a session that was. Of course, it looks absolutely blooming diabolical with Lightroom's excessive contrast on it. We could go and do a linearization with no sharpening on it, or if you like, a process version swap with some sharpening on it. Doesn't really matter. You can see the image is relatively clean. If we change that to 0 sharpening, now you can sort of get a true idea of the amount of noise which is in the image, and it looks a lot more acceptable on this older camera than it does with the default settings. Where have they gone? Where's it set? Ah, there it is, settings. Go settings reset. It looked a lot more acceptable than this does, and this is just solely down to Lightroom's hidden background excess contrast. So we could go this way, but I'm not going to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Show in Finder, and there it is. And so what I'm going to do is right click on the raw file in its own folder, and I'm just going to go open with, and we'll go open with DeNoise 3.4.1. And here we go, it's opening up. And so what we're doing is now feeding the raw file directly into Topaz D Noise AI 3.4.1. Now you think to yourself, well, Andy, that's a little bit on the dark side. Well, here's a little thing. If we just slip back over to Lightroom, you'll notice that my original raw file, whoops-a-daisy, for this shot of Miguel is, where are we, library. It's plus 2/3 EV above meter. Yeah, that's what helps us maintain this little gap at the end of the histogram, or the ends of the histogram, and keep a little bit of bulk, and keep the bulk of the histogram as far right as we can do. The same when Steve's actually shot this with his 1DX Mark III. Again, 2/3 EV, positive exposure compensation. So when you expose at ISO, you are in effect underexposing the shot. So you need to actually give the shot a little bit extra exposure above what your meter says. This is at 0 EV comp, so fundamentally you can see that it is underexposed, and the bulk of the histogram is well over to the left hand side. We haven't got much of a gap in the histogram between there and black, and we haven't got much between there and the highlights and blown out white. So it's something you've got to be aware of when you start cranking your ISO up. So, and don't forget, when you crank your ISO up, you're not changing the sensitivity of your sensor. It is a physical impossibility. All sensors are fixed ISO, and so all you're doing is incrementally underexposing the image. So let's get back to where we were, Topaz D Noise, and yeah, I mean, the amount of noise reduction in there is crazy. Yes, the file is dark, but you can see when the preview's updated, you can see we've got rid of all the colour noise in the background, and we're only on remove noise of 3. Let's just hit auto and wait for that to render out. And I suppose fundamentally it doesn't really look any different. But again, what we're doing is by using auto, we're actually putting in 20 noise reduction when really and truly we only need 3 or 4. And just wait for that to process up. You'll notice I'm not using the severe noise algorithm. If we use the severe noise algorithm, let's just go and click on there, wait for that to render out. And there you go. I mean, it's as long as it is broad. I personally, I 9 times out of 10, I end up using low light, and I just think it does an excellent job. There are some errant colours being generated in the body of this goshawk here, and so what I will do is, because we're not using Lightroom's colour noise reduction, I'm actually going to crank up the colour noise reduction inside of Topaz D Noise. But because the image was shot at 0 EV, the camera's meter has wanted to fundamentally underexpose the image even more than it was being underexposed through cranking the ISO up. So that's why the shot is a little bit dark. But that is not necessarily all that much of a problem, because if we go save image, we can save this image as a DNG. You see, we can preserve source format. Yeah, I'd actually go for DNG. I've not tried this very much, but I've seen it before and it doesn't always work. So I'd actually, if I'm sticking with processing in Lightroom, I'd actually switch it out to a DNG, save it to the source directory, and then we'll click save, and just let it process that DNG out with those particular noise reduction and sharpening enhancement adjustments baked in. And let's just wait for that to process. And there we go, it's just about done. So what we'll do is we'll go close panel, and we will actually now click back on this image, and we will go to folder in library, and supposedly it's in that one, and all we'll do is go synchronize folder, and it's got one new photo, so we'll click synchronize. That will bring up the import dialog box, and there it is, dnoise lowlight.dng. We'll click import, and what we'll do is I'll shut down folders now, don't need that open, whoops-a-daisy, previous import, and I'll drag that down into this new collection. And of course, because it's a DNG, alrighty, I can now go into the develop module, and I can actually turn the exposure up. In point of fact, what I can do is I can actually go and do a process version swap on it, and then just put the exposure back, take it up to 100%, and then just sort of play around, put maybe a little bit of contrast back, warm the white balance up, because fundamentally we're dealing with a raw file, and I might actually add a little bit of exposure, rather like that. And look at that, I mean, that is just crazy. Now the other thing is, if we come down to the details panel, you can see we've got Lightroom's default raw sharpening applied. Don't need it. Don't need it. Because it's a DNG file, it's thought, right, I'll go and put my raw sharpening on. If we turn all the sharpening off and then just start to feed it back on, all we're doing is adding to the sharpening enhancement that was actually put on the shot by Topaz D Noise. And there we go. And I mean, holy moly, if I come back to the original raw file, and then I click settings reset, yeah, that's what we started out with, and that is what we've ended up with. I mean, crikey, come on, guys. And that's without doing a smart object workflow in Photoshop. That's just shifting the images in and out of Topaz D Noise, the latest version. I'm really blown away by this latest version. And so my recommendation is there's a link down below. It is an affiliate link, in all honesty. So if you've not got Topaz D Noise, click the link and go and buy it. They've got a bit of a discount on at the minute, I think, until either Christmas Day or until New Year. And in all honesty, you know, full disclosure, they do give me a couple of quid if you go and click that link. And for those of you who have got Topaz D Noise but need to update it, yeah, go and update it. And if your license has run out, go and renew your license, yeah? It is worth it. I mean, I'm just absolutely blown away by it. So there you go, guys. Hope that's proved useful. Hope you found it interesting. And until the next time, stay safe, stay well, keep taking the pictures, and happy Christmas. Bar bloody humbug. See you soon, guys. Stay safe.